I've thought about this moment for a long time. Not what I would say exactly, but how I would feel standing here. And honestly, I still don't have the perfect words. But here's what I know. I lost everything once. And when you lose everything, you find out what actually matters. She matters. Not in a small way, not in a she's important to me kind of way, in a I didn't know I was lost until I found her kind of way. People talk about the future like it's something you plan, but she is my future, and I would lose everything again 100 times over if it meant arriving exactly here, standing in front of her, because some things aren't lost. Some things are just waiting, and she was worth every single wait. There is a particular kind of silence that follows total loss. Not the silence of a quiet room, not the silence of a peaceful night, but the silence that comes when everything you built, everything you believed in, everything you were absolutely certain would hold simply doesn't. It collapses, and the sound it makes when it falls is almost nothing at all. That is the cruelest part. You expect an explosion. You expect the universe to at least acknowledge what just happened to you. But it doesn't. The world keeps moving. People keep laughing somewhere down the street. A bird still lands on a wire outside your window, and you are standing in the middle of what used to be your life. And the silence is so complete that you start to wonder if any of it was ever real to begin with. I know that silence. I have lived inside it. I have sat with it at 3 in the morning when sleep was something other people did. When the ceiling above me became the only thing I could look at, because looking anywhere else meant seeing the wreckage. And the wreckage was everywhere. It was in the empty spaces where certainty used to live. It was in the plans that no longer had a future attached to them. It was in the version of myself I had carefully constructed over years. The one who had it together, the one who knew where he was going, the one who could look another person in the eye and say with full confidence that he was okay. That version didn't survive what happened, and for a long time I wasn't sure anything else would either. Losing everything is not a metaphor when it actually happens to you. People use that phrase loosely. They say it about a bad week, about a lost job, about a relationship that ended badly. And I understand that loss is loss and pain is pain, and I would never stand here and measure anyone else's suffering against my own. But there is a specific gravity to the moment when you look around and realize that the sum total of what you had built has come undone. When it isn't one thing, when it is the accumulation of many things falling one after another, like something that was always going to happen, like a structure that had a flaw in its foundation from the very beginning, and you just didn't see it. Or maybe you saw it and you told yourself it would hold, because what else do? You tell yourself it will hold, and then one day it doesn't. I lost things that I thought were permanent. I lost a sense of direction that I had carried so long it felt like part of my identity. I lost the confidence that comes from believing you understand how your life is supposed to go. I lost relationships that I thought were solid. I lost a version of the future I had been quietly building in the back of my mind. The one I never fully spoke out loud, because speaking it out loud felt like tempting something. Turns out you don't have to speak it out loud. It can still be taken. And when it was taken, I didn't respond the way people in stories respond to loss. I didn't rise immediately. I didn't find clarity in the ashes right away. I sat in it. I stayed in it longer than was probably healthy, longer than the people around me were comfortable with, longer than I was comfortable with. Because when you lose everything, the first thing that goes is the roadmap. And without a roadmap, you don't know which direction to start walking, so sometimes you just stand still. Sometimes standing still is the most honest thing you can do. And I stood still for a long time. I want to tell you what that stillness taught me, because it did teach me things, even when it felt like it was only taking. The stillness taught me what I was actually made of underneath all the things I had used to define myself. When you strip away the titles, the plans, the relationships, the structures, the routines, when all of that is gone, what you are left with is something much quieter and much harder to look at. You are left with just yourself, the raw, undecorated version, the one that exists without context, without achievement, without the comfortable scaffolding of a life that is going according to plan. And meeting that version of yourself is one of the most disorienting experiences a person can have because you don't always like what you see. You see the fears you had been outrunning. You see the places where you were not as strong as you presented yourself to be. You see the things you had avoided dealing with because life, when it is busy and full and moving forward, gives you 1,000 reasons not to stop and look at the difficult things. But in the silence after loss, there are no more reasons. There is only you and the difficult things in a room together with nowhere to go. I sat with my difficult things. I had no choice. And what I found after a long time of sitting with them was something I did not expect. I found that underneath the fear and the confusion and the grief of losing everything, there was something that had not been lost. Something small and stubborn and very quiet. Something that did not depend on any of the external things I had built. I couldn't name it right away. I just knew it was there because I was still there, still breathing, still on some mornings finding a reason to get up. Not a big reason, not an inspiring reason, just a small one, just enough. And I want you to understand that this is what the ruins gave me. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually they gave me the ground floor. They gave me the foundation that had nothing false in it, because everything false had already been removed. When you lose everything and you survive it, and I want to be careful with that word survive, because I don't use it dramatically. I use it because there were moments when I was not sure I would come through the other side of what I was feeling. When you survive it, you don't come out the same. You come out quieter. You come out slower in a way that isn't weakness, but is something closer to deliberateness. You stop moving just to feel like you're going somewhere. You start to understand the difference between motion and direction. And you become, if you let yourself, more honest about what you want, more honest about what you can no longer pretend to be, more honest about what you need and what you are willing to give and where your actual limits are. That honesty is the only thing I brought with me out of the wreckage. It was the only thing that was mine, completely mine, that nothing could take. And I carried it forward like it was the most valuable thing I had ever owned, because by that point, it was. I carried it into the slow process of rebuilding, not rebuilding what I had lost. I want to be clear about that. I was not trying to reconstruct the old version of my life because that version had already shown me it wasn't as solid as I believed. I was building something different, something that started from the ground, from honesty, from the understanding that nothing is guaranteed and that the only real currency any of us have is the truth of who we are and the choices we make with the time we are given. That process was slow. It was not linear. It did not look from the outside like anything recognizable as progress, but it was happening quietly, the way real things happen, the way a tree doesn't announce its growth but is simply one day taller than it was. And I was in that slow, unglamorous, deeply human process of becoming someone I could actually stand behind, not someone I had constructed for the approval of others. Not someone performing a version of strength that had no real depth to it, but someone genuine, someone who had been tested and had not entirely shattered when something happened that I was not looking for and was not prepared for and could not have predicted or planned or designed even if I had tried. She happened, and I need you to understand the timing of that because the timing matters more than anything. She did not arrive when I was whole. She did not arrive when I had rebuilt myself into something impressive and presentable and easy to love. She arrived when I was still in the middle of it, still carrying the weight of what I had lost, still figuring out who I was becoming, still uncertain, still cautious, still moving slowly and deliberately, because I had learned the hard way what happens when you move too fast on a foundation you haven't checked. She arrived in the middle of the mess, and she stayed. That is the part I keep coming back to. Not that she was beautiful, Not that she was everything I might have once written on a list of what I wanted. Not that she made me feel things I had stopped expecting to feel. All of that is true. But none of that is the part that broke something open in me. The part that broke something open was that she stayed. She didn't need me to be finished. She didn't need me to have arrived at some completed, resolved, ready to be loved version of myself. She was just there, in the actual present tense of my life. Not the future version, not the improved version, not the version that had it together. The real version, the one still finding his footing, the one still learning what he was made of, and something about being seen in that state, really seen and not turned away from, did something to me that I am still honestly trying to find language for, because loss had taught me to protect myself. Loss had taught me that the things you count on can disappear. Loss had taught me to hold things a little more loosely, to not build too much on any single point of certainty, because certainty has a way of being revealed as something far more fragile than it presented itself to be. And then she came along and made me want to count on something again. Not recklessly, not blindly, but genuinely with my eyes open, knowing the risk, knowing that nothing is guaranteed, knowing that I had lost before and could lose again, and wanting it anyway, wanting her anyway. And that wanting arriving when it did, after everything I had been through, after all the silence and the wreckage and the slow rebuilding, that wanting felt like the first true thing I had felt in a very long time. It felt like the ruins had not been the end of the story. It felt like they had been, all along, the beginning of this one. There is a sound that loss makes in the body that has nothing to do with noise. It is not something you hear with your ears. It is something you feel in the chest, somewhere beneath the sternum, in a place that doesn't have a clean anatomical name, but that every person who has ever truly suffered knows exactly how to locate without being told. It is a frequency, a low, constant, almost imperceptible hum that runs underneath everything. Underneath the conversations you have with people who ask how you are doing. Underneath the routines you maintain. Because routine is the last scaffolding standing when everything else has come down. Underneath the sleep you manage to get and the food you manage to eat and the mornings you manage to get through without falling apart completely. It runs underneath all of it. And for a long time after I lost everything, that frequency was the most honest thing about me. It was the truth that existed below the surface of whatever I was presenting to the world. The world saw someone managing. The frequency knew better. I became, in that period, intimately familiar with silence in a way I had never been before. Not because I sought it out, not because I am the kind of person who naturally gravitates towards stillness, but because loss clears the room. It removes the noise that you didn't even realize you were using as insulation. The busyness, the plans, the forward momentum, the social texture of a life that is working. All of that creates a kind of sound, a background hum of aliveness that you don't notice until it's gone. And when it's gone, what's left is a silence so specific and so complete that it starts to feel like a presence in itself, like something that has moved into the space where your life used to be and made itself at home there. I lived with that silence. I learned its rhythms. I learned that it was loudest in the early mornings, in those first few seconds after waking, when the brain hasn't yet remembered what happened, when there is half a breath of peace before the weight settles back down onto the chest where it lived. I learned that it was different at night, less sharp, more diffuse, more like weather than like a specific pain. I learned that it had textures, that it wasn't one thing but many things layered on top of each other, grief and confusion and a low, steady anger and something that wasn't quite loneliness but was adjacent to it, something more like the awareness of absence, the consciousness of all the things that used to fill the space and no longer did. And I learned, slowly and without wanting to, how to exist inside it. Not comfortably, not with any grace, but functionally, The way you learn to exist inside any condition that is not going to change on your timeline, that is not going to resolve itself because you are ready for it to resolve. That simply is what it is and requires you to find a way to keep moving through it, even when moving feels like the hardest possible thing. I was inside that silence when she first appeared, at the edge of it. And I want to try to describe what that was like, because it was unlike anything I had experienced before. And I don't want to reduce it to something smaller than it actually was by reaching for the easy words, the romantic words, the words that people use when they are describing this kind of thing from a safe distance. I want to describe it as it actually happened, which is to say quietly, without announcement, without the dramatic clarity that stories tend to assign to the moments that change everything. She didn't arrive with music. She didn't arrive with the sudden revelation that something important was happening. She arrived the way light arrives in a room when someone opens a door that you forgot was there. Not blinding, not overwhelming, but undeniably present, undeniably warm, casting something different across surfaces that had only known a particular kind of shadow for a very long time. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. When you have been living in a certain quality of silence for long enough, you become calibrated to it. Your nervous system adjusts, your expectations adjust. You stop waiting for something different because waiting for something different is its own kind of suffering and you have enough suffering already. And so you make a kind of private peace with the way things are, and you tell yourself that this is fine, that this is enough, that you don't need more than this. And then something arrives that is more than this, and the calibration is thrown off, and you don't know how to stand in relation to it. That was what her presence did to me before I had words for it. It threw off the calibration. It introduced a frequency that was different from the one I had grown used to, and my whole interior world had to figure out what to do with that. Because the silence I had been living in was not just the absence of noise, it was the absence of being truly heard. And I don't mean heard in the simple sense, in the sense of someone listening to what you say and nodding and responding appropriately. I mean heard in the deeper sense, in the sense of being perceived, being understood, being received by another person in a way that goes beneath the surface of the words you use and touches something closer to what you actually are. That kind of hearing is rarer than people admit. Most of what passes for connection in daily life is surface contact. Two people touching at the edges, exchanging information, maintaining the social contract, moving on. Real hearing is different. Real hearing requires something from both people. It requires the one speaking to be willing to say something true, and it requires the one listening to be willing to hold what is true without flinching, without immediately trying to fix it or reframe it or make it more comfortable. Real hearing just holds. And I had been in a silence built partly from the absence of that, from a long stretch of time in which the true things about me had no real place to go, in which the frequency running underneath everything had no receiver, in which I was, in the most fundamental sense, alone with the reality of what I was going through. And then she was there. And something in the way she existed near me, not even in what she said at first, not in any single gesture or word or moment, but in the simple fact of how she was present, began to feel like the first thing in a very long time that was tuned to the same frequency. Not perfectly, not without static, but genuinely, undeniably close to it. And I didn't trust it immediately. I want to be honest about that, because honesty is all I have that is worth giving. And the honest truth is that someone who has lost as much as I had lost does not open easily to new things. The heart that has been through real loss develops a kind of scar tissue, not to protect itself from feeling, but to slow things down, to make the feeling take longer to arrive so that it can be examined before it is trusted. And I examined. I watched, not with suspicion, not with coldness, but with the careful attention of someone who has learned the cost of not paying attention. I noticed the way she spoke about things that mattered to her, the seriousness underneath the lightness, the depth that moved below the surface of ordinary conversation, like a current you sense before you see. I noticed the way she responded to difficulty, not with performance, not with the managed emotions of someone playing a role, but with something more unscripted, more real, more honest than what most people allow themselves to show. There is a particular myth that surrounds the idea of being saved by another person. It is one of the oldest stories we tell, and we tell it so often and in so many forms that it begins to feel like truth, like a law of emotional physics, like something that simply is the way things work when a person has been broken down far enough and the right someone appears at the right moment. The myth says that love rescues, that the right person arrives and lifts you out of whatever you have fallen into, that their presence is the hand extended into the darkness you have been living in, that all you have to do is reach up and take it, and the rest follows naturally, effortlessly, like something that was always meant to happen. I understood that myth before I lived through real loss. I understood it the way you understand things that you have absorbed from the culture around you without ever having tested them against actual experience. And then I lost everything and the real experience arrived, and I learned that the myth, while beautiful, is not the truth. Or rather, it is not my truth. And the distinction matters more to me than I can easily say, because the distinction is where she lives, where what she actually is to me lies, and I refuse to reduce what she actually is to me to something smaller and simpler and more romantic sounding than the real thing. She did not save me. I need to say that plainly, without softening it, without the kind of qualifying language that makes difficult truths easier to receive, but less honest in the receiving. She did not reach into the wreckage and pull me out. She did not appear and make the damage disappear. She did not love me back into wholeness the way the myth says love is supposed to work. That is not what happened. And the reason I am telling you what did not happen before I tell you what did is because what did happen is better. It is harder and more real and more worthy of the truth than the myth. And I want to give it the full weight of what it actually is, rather than dressing it in borrowed language that doesn't fit.